Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Unsolved Ramblings. If you are new here, I ramble and speculate about unsolved missing persons cases in hopes of shedding light so that these families can be that much closer to some answers. Before I dive right in, I'd like to state that I am not an expert and that this is for entertainment purposes. All of my sources come from what has been published online. All online sources are linked in the description of this video. Today, we are going to ramble about two different cases that happen to be tangled with one another. Gary McCullough and LENA CHAPIN are missing. Gary went missing on May 11th of 1999. LENA went missing on Valentine's Day in 2006. You've got to be thinking, well, that's 7 years apart. How are these cases connected? Well, Gary was once LENA's stepfather. Gary was LENA's mother, Sandy's third husband. When Gary vanished without a trace in 1999, he was a 34-year-old white male standing at 6'3", weighing at about 240 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. He went missing from Cassville, Missouri. When LENA went missing in 2006, she was described as a 20-year-old white female standing at 5'8", weighing at about 130 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. She went missing from Steelville, Missouri. This case is full of twists and turns. Two people missing, two sets of investigators, many questions, one common denominator, yet still no answers. Sandra Wink is now her name, but she has gone by many in the past, as she has been married 5 times. Sandra Wink is LENA CHAPIN's mother and Gary McCullough's ex-wife. Our story begins with her and ends with two people close to her gone without a trace. First, Sandy is married to Robert Chapin, who is the biological father of LENA, one of Sandy's 6 children. All girls: Brandy, LENA, Robin, Jeannie, Rachel, and Rosie. The sources I found were unclear if Robert was the father of all 6 children. Sandy and Robert divorced, and Brandy recalls that growing up they were very poor. Sandy was always working, but she made sure that the kids never went hungry. Brandy recalls Sandy being a good mom when the girls were little, that Sandy would always tuck them into bed every night and say to them, "I love you and God bless you." Brandy stated she misses that version of her mother, but Sandy is no longer that person. Brandy also stated in interviews that Sandy used her sex appeal to get what she wanted out of men, and she usually went after the ones with wives or brothers, that they were constantly moving around because Sandy had met a new man. Sandy had a history of meeting men, getting them hooked, and then she would grow bored and move on to the next one. After being single and divorced for a while in early 1994, Sandy meets Albert McCullough and begins dating him. By November of 1994, the two have wed. Brandy recalls Albert being a wonderful stepfather, known to the 6 girls as the fun one. Got them into gymnastics and sports. Brandy stated, "He raised us. Mom was going through nursing school, so she was always gone. Naturally, being the only parent home, Albert took responsibility for the children." Albert spoke in an interview. He stated that Sandy was a good talker. She was great at telling people what they wanted to hear. Albert and Sandy went on a couple of dates, and that's how they got acquainted. Albert stated in interviews that he thought the marriage with Sandy was going well until her behavior towards him changed, and he suspected that she was running around on him. After 2 years of marriage, Albert is heartbroken when he learns Sandy is having an affair with none other than his own brother, Gary. The two brothers have a dramatic fistfight, beating the tar out of each other, and Albert gets Gary pinned down. That's when Sandy sneaks up and whacks Albert in the back with a large stick. Albert tells Gary he's done, that woman is trouble, and he better leave her alone. Their marriage lasted from November 17th of 1994 to May 22nd of 1996. Not even a full 2 years. Of course, Gary didn't listen to Albert, and he married Sandy in December of 1996. The kids and Sandy had been living with Gary on his farm in Cassville, Missouri. Brandy and Robin both recalled how much their lives changed when they moved in with Gary. He made the kids do chores. Each child had one chore, and when they finished, Gary would take them for ice cream in town. Robin recalls in an interview that they had to work their butts off, cutting wood and taking care of the farm animals. But all in all, they both stated Gary was an excellent role model in their lives, stating he gave them important life lessons and qualities that they are still using in their daily lives today. Brandy stated Gary was a good man, just got mixed up with the wrong person. Sticking to her pattern, Gary and Sandy are married, living a great life on a huge farm, and Sandy gets bored. She meets Chris Klemp. Chris is 10 years younger, and some say more handsome than Gary. The pair begin having an affair in March of 1999. Chris comes from a wealthy family, and they own a lot of property across Missouri, so of course Sandy is attracted to him. Gary calls his friend and attorney Richard Anderson to tell him that he learned of the affair and that Gary had been arrested for passing bad checks. Gary figured out that Sandy had wrote those checks. Gary was calling his attorney to say he was going to have to file for divorce. Next thing Richard knows, Gary's gone missing. In an interview with Jeff Allen, one of Gary's friends, Gary was a very hard worker. He never missed work. He couldn't afford to miss work. To everyone who knew Gary, when he didn't show up to work, they immediately knew they weren't looking for Gary. He wouldn't have gone off somewhere. They were looking for Gary's body. Once Jeff Allen concludes that Gary is gone, he contacts police officials and tells them about the last time he's seen Gary. Gary came over to his house with a shotgun. Gary asked Jeff to take the shotgun and put it up somewhere safe. Then Gary went on to say that Sandy acted like she was going to kill him with the gun. She actually stuck it in my stomach and pulled the trigger, he said. When Jeff opened the gun, there was a bullet inside. He asked Gary, "I thought you said it was unloaded." Gary said, "I always unload my guns when I'm done shooting them." Jeff says, "Well, you didn't this time. There's a live round in here." Jeff whips out his pliers and he pulls out the bullet. And when he does, powder starts falling out. The gun had misfired. And if it hadn't, Sandy would have killed Gary with that shot to the stomach. Jeff says that that was the last time he seen his friend Gary. Robert McCullough, Gary's cousin, is the one who reports Gary missing to officials on May 13th, 1999. A coincidence because authorities are already en route to Gary's farm on a loose animal call. The police are in the process of putting the cow away, and Sandy and Lena pull up asking what they're doing there. The authorities begin asking Sandy if there's anything on the farm that's going on, anything in Sandy's life that they need to be aware of. And Sandy replies, "Oh, yeah, I've been meaning to call you. My husband went off a couple days ago, and he hasn't returned." Sandy's story was that Gary left to go purchase a fighting rooster in Diamond, Missouri, but he never returned. An official missing persons report is filed for Gary McCullough on May 13th of 1999. 1 week later, the police obtain search warrants and go back out to Gary's farm to serve them. Naturally, Sandy is not happy and uncooperative. However, the authorities discovered that none of Gary's clothes were there, and they learned that Chris Klemp had moved into the residence 2 days after Gary went missing. There were no signs that Gary was even living there or even planned on coming back. Sheriff Mick Epperly asked Sandy to take a polygraph test. Sandy looked the detective in the eye and stated, and I quote, "You find a body, I will take the test." Now, why would you say that if you had absolutely nothing to do with someone's disappearance? That one statement made to the authorities is enough for me to suspect that Sandy is guilty of something. There are too many red flags as far as Sandy is confirmed. Jumping from bed to bed to bed, jumping into relationships with these men, marrying them, leaving them when she gets bored and moves on to the next one. This woman is very manipulative. But this is where Lena comes in, because even though Brandy was the oldest, Lena always seemed to be the one in charge. She's described as ornery, bubbly, and outspoken. You never had to guess what was on Lena's mind because she would be the first to tell you. When investigators didn't get any closer to finding Gary's body, they decide that they need to interview Sandy's children. It became very clear to the investigators that Mom ruled the house, but that Lena was second in charge. Lena, 13 years old at the time, was very defensive and hostile towards the police where her mother was concerned. Brandy remembers that Lena had told them to keep their mouths shut, mind their own business, and not speak about what happened the day that Gary went missing. Brandy says Sandy asked her children to lie for her all of their lives. That was nothing new for them. It wasn't until Brandy was an adult and she decided to talk to the producers of Unsolved Mysteries and finally speak the truth of what happened the day that Gary went missing. Her account is it's May 11th and the girls just hopped off the bus. They're met at the door by Sandy telling them a cat had had her kittens in the field and to go look for them. 4 of the girls went to look. Lena and Brandy stayed behind. Sandy asked Lena to help her, and Brandy had to milk the cows. Brandy is sitting on the porch waiting to be allowed inside as she needed to get her supplies to go milk the cows. After several minutes of waiting, she decides to go inside, and when she opens the door, she finds Sandy on her hands and knees scrubbing the floor with what smelled like bleach water. Sandy is wearing a t-shirt and shorts and has her hair in a ponytail. Brandy states her mother never wore her hair in a ponytail. That evening, Sandy sets the girls down at the table for dinner and tells the girls what to say should anyone ask. That Gary went to Diamond and never returned, and that they had spaghetti that night for dinner. Later that evening, Sandy put Brandy, Robin, Jeannie, Rachel, and Rosie in their room and made Lena stand guard at the door. Once Lena fell asleep, Robin remembers looking out the window and seeing Sandy and Chris struggling to carry a very large object, and when she looked closer, she could see boots at one end. She didn't realize it at the time, but as she became an adult and recalls these memories, she states it was probably Gary's body they were struggling with. Sandy would often manipulate her children with the state's protection services, stating they would be taken away and separated from each other and put into different foster homes and never seen again. But if they say exactly what Sandy told them to say, everything would be fine. Authorities learned that Chris had tried to hire someone to murder Gary. Chris was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, but due to lack of evidence, the charges were dropped a month after they were filed. Sandy and Chris decided to leave the Cassville area. Then they moved to St. Louis for a year. During this time in St. Louis, Chris and Sandy get married, making Chris her 4th husband. Once married, they moved to property owned by Chris's parents in Sligo, Missouri, where Lena attended Salem High School, but she did not graduate. Sandy had Robin, Jeannie, Rachel, and Rosie's last names changed to Klimp. Traumatized, Lena begins partying and doing drugs. She became very agitated and hostile. Friends and family stated that you could tell something was weighing heavily on Lena's shoulders. Lena had lost herself. She was lonely. Lena finally confesses everything she knows to an ex-boyfriend in 2003, who encourages her to go to the police. The ex-boyfriend told Lena she owed it to Gary's family to speak up. But instead of going to the authorities, Lena goes to her former stepfather, Albert. Lena thought a lot of Albert, and Albert could tell that something was eating at Lena. Albert decides to record the entire conversation. In the recording played during the episode on Unsolved Mysteries, you can hear Albert ask Lena who killed Gary, and Lena answers, Mom. Lena goes on in the recording to say he was sitting on the couch eating eggs. She walked out and shot him 3 times in the head, 2, maybe 3 times, and she couldn't hack it until we got home. And she wrapped him with plastic stuff and hay strings. She dragged him into the bedroom, locked the door. We got home. Mom made me stay in the bedroom. She didn't want me to see him, but it was too late. I'd already seen him because I looked through the door. I didn't believe it, and I wanted to see it. We ripped up carpets and scrubbed the floors with bleach. Then she and Chris loaded him in the truck and left. Albert knew it was the truth. He could tell Lena needed to get this off her chest. Lena was shaking. Later in the recording, Albert asked Lena for proof to verify Gary is gone and how someone would go about obtaining the proof. Lena states there is nothing. Gary was burned, and what was left on the burn pile was loaded into buckets and spread all over. Lena couldn't recall where, just that she had burned her fingers picking up the ashes and bones. She went on to say she is the only one of the kids who knows, that she is the only one who knows exactly what happened to Gary, but there is nothing left. I know this makes me sound like a bad person, but what was I supposed to do? Albert replies, you was a kid, doing what your mom told you to do. Albert took the recording to the authorities, and the next day, Sandra had found out, lawyered up, and took Lena down to the police station to walk back her confession. Without the confession and no hard evidence, the authorities can't charge Sandy and Chris with murder. Not long after, Lena told Brandy the shocking confession of what happened to Gary. Brandy states, "After she told me, she made me pinky swear to never tell anyone. A couple days later, I was trying to get a ride from Mom and Chris when they were going to St. Louis, but my mom kept saying no. I got really mad. So I screamed and said, 'You're going to take me or I'm going to tell the police what you did to Gary.' Lena heard that from the other room and she came in with a red face and shoved me into a mirror. I'd never seen her so mad. I cut my finger on a piece of broken shard of glass and I asked to be taken to the hospital. I got in the bed of the truck and Chris and Mom started driving me to the hospital. We left in the truck to go, but all of a sudden, we don't take a right into Salem, but went left down Highway TT and down a gravel road. I started pounding on the back glass, saying, 'We're going the wrong way.' We stop, and the dome light goes off, and Chris gets out of the driver's seat, gets a double-barrel shotgun from behind the seat. So I jump over the opposite side of the bed, and we start playing cat and mouse around the truck. And then I'm screaming for my life. The radio starts blaring. It's up so loud, it's vibrating the windows. I didn't know if I should run. I didn't know the area. I didn't want to give Chris a clear shot. So then, all of a sudden, I think if Mom's doors was unlocked and I can get to her. So I went for it, and sure enough, I get in and I grabbed onto her tight. I said, 'Mom, please don't let him kill me. I won't tell anyone. Please.' She just stared straight ahead. After several seconds go by, she finally says, 'Don't hurt my baby. Don't worry, Brandy. We were just trying to scare you,' Brandy says. Brandy says that Sandy forced Chris to apologize back at the house that night, and they all shared a group hug. Sandy grabbed us and said, 'We're okay now, right?' Brandy stated. She never went home again. Lena and I would both joke about it with one another, saying, 'You better watch out or Mom will get you,' Brandy says. But she would say, 'Mom wouldn't do that to me. She'd never touch me.' Up to that point, Mom had always been all about us kids and keeping us together. I never thought she would be capable of actually killing one of us. But then Lena went missing," stated Brandy. A few short months after Lena told Albert everything she knew, Lena gave birth to her son Coulter in November of 2003. That was the last time she wanted to talk about it. Lena focused on working and raising her son. Sandy would watch Coulter while Lena worked. Robin stated in interviews that her mother was obsessed with Coulter. She wanted him to be her son because she had only ever had girls, even forced Coulter to call her mom. Sandy would often show Coulter off while out in town and say that he was hers. Lena would get very mad about this and say, "No, Mom, he is mine." Lena just wanted to settle down and provide for Coulter. She wanted to be financially free of Sandy and be a good mother to her son. But trouble began brewing and tensions were high between Lena and Sandy because in late 2005, Gary's daughters filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Sandy and Chris with Lena as an accessory. The theory is that authorities can convince Lena to turn for full immunity from the crimes. When the authorities go to serve a summons to appear in court, they find Chris and Sandy, but not Lena. When authorities ask Sandy where Lena is, she states Lena went off to Florida with some guy back in February. Authorities go to Lena's last known residence in Stillville, Missouri, that she shared with her boyfriend Jason, and Jason stated on Valentine's Day 2006, he kissed Lena on the way out the door, but when she returned home from work that evening, Jason was met by Sandy, not Lena. Sandy was clearing out Lena's belongings. When he asked where Lena was, Sandy stated she ran off to Florida with some guy in a black 2000 Chevy Cavalier. Brandy didn't believe this story of Lena running off with some guy. She stated that Lena would not leave her son, that she had been getting closer to Lena and Lena had confided in her that she was talking about marriage with Jason. Brandy doesn't believe Lena would have given Sandy the satisfaction of having Coulter willingly. Brandy and Robin both stated that Lena's belongings just sat on the back porch until they were ruined. As authorities don't have any evidence or any signs of foul play, they did not investigate Lena's disappearance right away. The civil case was tried without Lena as a witness, and they were not allowed to use her taped confession. And in the summer of 2013, Sandy and Chris Klemp were found guilty and ordered to pay $7 million in emotional damages. The pair divorced in 2014. Gary McCullough was declared dead in March of 2005 at request by his surviving family members. LENA Chapin's whereabouts have stayed in limbo for almost 3 years until her biological father, Robert Chapin in Arkansas, alerted Detective Epperly to her disappearance. Epperly personally worked with Chapin's father to file a report in Berry County in November of 2008. After hearing about yet another disappearance in the family, Albert says he became so frustrated that he and some friends made the 3-hour drive to Salem to put up the missing persons posters for LENA. He did state, though, he doesn't think that they were up but for a couple of days, that Sandy had paid her youngest daughter $5 a poster to remove them. Authorities in Salem were not notified that LENA was missing until 2012. They stated that none of the family members alerted them to the disappearance. Brandy says the reason none of the sisters reported LENA missing is because Sandy was going around town and to each sister telling them lies that LENA had said all these horrible things about each of them. Sandy was telling people that LENA became a drug addict and turned to prostitution to pay for the drugs, and that's why she ran off to Florida. Authorities find it unbelievable that a girl into drugs ran off and never got into trouble with law enforcement again. They claim that that is very unlikely. There have been unofficial investigations into the properties that Sandy and Chris Klemp had access to at the time of LENA's disappearance, but nothing has been found to further along the investigation. Sandy gained custody of Coulter. She filed abandonment charges not long after LENA disappeared, and when LENA did not show up for court, the judge granted Sandy custody. As the time has gone by, there have been no reported tips, no sightings, no evidence of LENA. There are a few theories, and authorities think they have an idea of what happened. Theory number 1, Sandy killed LENA to continue to cover up her crime of murdering Gary McCullough. Sandy is no doubt the one that looks the most suspicious. The problem is there is no concrete evidence to convict her. Sandy has several motives. Besides Gary's murder, there's Coulter. She never had a boy. She really wanted one. She wanted to raise him as his own. I mean, this theory is pretty likely, as Sandy did get custody of Coulter. Theory number 2 is that Chris killed LENA. Both Chris and Sandy have refused to cooperate with any investigation, not Gary's or LENA's. Then there is the account Brandy gave about Chris and Sandy trying to scare her. Berry County Sheriff Mick Epperly told the Monette Times they think Sandy and Chris are insurance for each other, that all Sandy has is Chris Klemp. Sandy can't testify against Chris because they believe Chris killed LENA because she was the loose end. Chris can't testify against Sandy because Chris helped dispose of Gary's body. Theory number 3 is LENA actually did run off to Florida. There are several rumors that have flown around since LENA's disappearance, but LENA's sisters refuse to believe this one, stating that LENA would never leave her son behind. LENA did not take her clothes or her pictures, which was one of LENA's favorite things, taking pictures of her life. Theory number 4, LENA got wrapped up with the wrong people. Again, this rumor comes from Sandy herself, who, according to LENA's sister, Brandy, she says that LENA had been hanging out with the wrong crowds and became a sex worker to get access to drugs. Brandy is highly skeptical of this. LENA's friend Rachel Bryce also doubts this. Rachel stated, "It's so unfair that Sandy can just say LENA was into drugs as if that's the reason why she disappeared. LENA only started using drugs because of her mom. LENA was partying too hard because she was traumatized from what her mother made her do," Rachel said. There are so many questions still left unanswered in these cases. There are so many details that have not been released. No bodies have ever been found, and LENA Chapin, she still remains a missing person. What do you guys think happened in this case? I definitely think Sandy did something to Gary, for sure, 100%, and that she did something to LENA in order to still cover up her involvement in Gary's case. How can you be so cold, so calculated, still be living on the streets, smiling, living your life, and you've murdered 2 people. Now, again, this is speculation and allegations, as there is no concrete evidence to back up any of these theories, and there are no bodies to be found. But if you have any information regarding LENA Chapin or Gary McCullough's case, please contact the Berry County Sheriff's Office at 417-847-3121, or you can contact the Did County Sheriff's Office at 573-729-3241. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell to always be up to date when new cases drop. Thanks for listening, and as always, ramble on, my friends.